Hello and welcome back to How to Flourish in an age of abundance, in an age of the machine. It's been a while, and somewhat ironically, I've had the most profound creative block that has stopped me from making progress on an essay or a series of essays that concerns creativity. This was meant to be the easy or the fun part, the 5 C's that really help us stand out, differentiate, make ourselves valuable, help us flourish in a world of the machine, in a world of AI and tech enabled abundance. Creativity, curation, craft, care, and community. This is the good stuff. Easy to research, easy to write about. Or so I thought. This has been a brutally difficult series of essays to write because, my gosh, with regards to creativity, I probably picked the hardest one because where do you start? So much has been written about it. It's so fundamental. I'm trying to link it to this concept of how we flourish in the world as useful, scarce resources that can provide value in the workplace, but also give nourishment at home and to ourselves as well. And it's been a brutal exercise in reading and cutting down and staring at a blank sheet of paper. The power of constraints, as I'll talk about later. I think everyone has this. So I started, and then I realized that busy work, stuff that was not creative, but that was quote unquote productive, was more accessible and maybe more readily achievable. So I did that for the last few months. I've just been working on things that you get to the end of the day and you've produced a bunch of stuff, but you haven't really used the inner workings of yourself to get there. But it's easier. It's more superficial. It's to a greater or lesser extent, more superficially satisfying as well. So I've done that. It's not procrastination, but it is procrastination. But then I started to think, it doesn't need to be 10 out of 10. It just needs to be authentic and true to the way that I like to write and the way that I like to think. So I don't need to make this the best thing that's ever been written. I just need to get it out there. So much of what I talk about in these essays, and this one is the introductory essay, so much of what I talk about is the translation of the inner world out into the world to see how it shapes the outer world, but to see how you get shaped by it as well. And that involves taking risks. That involves a little bit of vulnerability. That involves getting it wrong. But you can't really get it wrong if you're being authentic. That's just who you are. That's the stuff that you're putting out. Yes, you need to do the work. I want people to listen to this, but you can't go too far wrong if you put your heart and your mind into it. So anyway, long introduction, and apologies if anyone was just desperate to get on with the next essay after the previous one dropped earlier on this year. But I've stored up a few creativity essays. I haven't finished the whole series. I think there's probably 8 or 9 discrete, short, 1 or 2,000 word essays that are going to help build that picture of why humans do creativity better. Creativity is uniquely human, and it's something that's going to help us flourish, thrive, stand out, be unique in the world of machine abundance. So without further ado, on with the essay. How to Flourish in an Age of Abundance. Part 2, Creativity. Introduction. 'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome raths outgrabe. Lewis Carroll, Jabberwocky. To create is to be human. Creativity is a wellspring bubbling up inside of us. It's always there for all of us. all of the time. The locus of our creativity resides deep within the most ancient parts of our body and our minds. Somewhere deep inside of us is an astonishment at the fact of our existence. Creativity is our attempt to comprehend, articulate, and express this profound joy and wonder. At first, creativity's wellspring is unrestrained. Our creativity is boundless, abundant, joyful. We make up new nonsense songs. We fit 2 and then 3 blocks together to make what we believe to be an entirely new shape. We use colourful crayons to render our inner world on scraps of paper. We discover the world and understand ourselves through quotidian creative acts. As children, we exist as a tabula rasa, an empty canvas, accessing our innate creative toolkit to explore and explain our ever-expanding world. Children are propelled forward by 2 questions which separate us from both animal and machine. What next? And what if? These 2 questions form the basis of every creative endeavor. Creativity arises from a boredom at the status quo. We listen to the same album too many times, growing used to, and then bored of, the simple melody we once thought was so profound. We see the same website design again and again, tiring of sans serif fonts and black and white logos. We observe the sleek curves of an aging car and decide that we want something a little different, a more angular facelift, perhaps. We see the same paintings hung in similar-looking buildings and cannot help but stifle a yawn. What was once at the cutting edge quickly becomes discarded as yesterday's news as we move forever onwards. The world isn't waiting for more of the same. Imagination is the basis of progress and a cornerstone of creativity. Imagination allows us to explore the possibility of a change in the order of things, moving from unsatisfactory to solved. Samuel Taylor Coleridge differentiates imagination from fancy. Fancy doesn't create anything new. It merely shuffles and combines existing things to create a novel pattern or perspective. Imagination, on the other hand, has the power to diffuse what is already known, rebuilding and reconceptualizing to create something unique and new. The most creative people use their fertile imaginations to break down the order of things, creating something from the rubble of our known world. The most creative people can imagine a world where a Shakespeare play could be turned into a contemporary musical, and then a feature film. They might imagine how pistachio and almond paste could satisfactorily complement a croissant. They might imagine how a riff might sound with a down-tuned bottom E or a color palette that shouldn't work, but somehow does. They might also imagine elegant equations and lines of code, the building blocks of a scientific breakthrough. Creativity relies on both expression and observation. Creativity is the outward expression of things that dwell within us. The most creative people are those that most consistently mind their inner worlds and have the courage and conviction to translate it into the language of the outside world. Like a river, the forceful current of our creativity can shape and mold the world around us. Observation provides us with our source material. By observing, we are encouraged to see problems and search for solutions. Through observations, we allow ourselves to spend time in quiet contemplation, allowing our mind to arrive at novel connections. Through observation, we can indulge in the beauty and chaos of the world around us, noticing the intricate patterns contained within a spider's web or the spindled veins of a pot plant. Through observation, we can explore the fault lines of our existence, reveling in humanity's vast Venn diagram of similarity and difference. However, creativity is not passive. It is not mere observation. It is not idle consumption. The word itself comes from the Latin verb crea, to bring something into existence. Creativity requires agency. It requires the passing of inputs through the gauze of our individuality to realize something new and unique. Creativity is, by our very nature, abundant. Because we are all individual, we are all unique, and therefore we all have the ability to bring something novel into the world. Every individual is a universe of experience, context, personality, and perspective, latent units of creative potential. Creativity requires cultivation for us to flourish. Much like a rarely used muscle, our creative instinct can atrophy, withering away through neglect and malnourishment. The longer we ignore our creative muscle, the less inclined we are to use it. Conversely, creativity begets creativity. Like going to the gym for the first time after a long break, a small creative act can feel like an insurmountable mountain. We delay, filling our lives with activity and administration, pushing our creative instinct further and further inwards. But then we write a sentence. Connect two problematic dots. Use a new color to render a coastal sunset and realize a small thrill, a release of dopamine that compels us to come back and try again. Happily, the river of our creativity never runs dry. It is constantly replenished, its flow becoming stronger as we utilize and nurture it. The most creative people positively overflow with new and novel ideas, moving from one creative endeavor to the next, harnessing their creative flow to bring new life into the world. However, our creative output can have unintended consequences. It was the profound creativity of intellectuals, statesmen, financiers, technologists, and managers that combined to conceptualize and implement an economic system that renders creativity as a pesky bug and not an enduring feature of our personalities and our purpose. It was from the creative genius of Adam Smith that we discovered specialization and the market's invisible hand. It was from the pen of Alfred Marshall that we accepted as truth the atomic nature of supply and demand. It was through Frederick Taylor's studious observation that managers were able to think scientifically about workforce productivity, the optimization of hands and feet. It was the obtuse genius of Jeremy Bentham who conceptualized rational utility functions to determine the worth of every action and every deed. It was the insight of Max Weber who revealed the necessity of bureaucracy and hierarchy in a well-ordered society. These intellectuals use studious observation and a mastery of their existing domain to bring something new and unique into the world. However, each of these creative breakthroughs served as an ever more conclusive nail in the coffin of our creative license. The principles by which societies cohered moved from religion and ritual, faith and beauty, imagination and creativity, joy and community, towards an economic optimization function governed by mathematical principles of marginal utility. No longer was it appropriate, optimal, rational, to do something for the sake of it. Every action that we took and everything that we created required a cold calculation of its utility to the ends of corporate profit and economic growth. More of the galvanizing functions that sat outside of the narrow utility of the market started to get sucked into this all-encompassing rational framework. Suddenly, community and art, religion and myth could only have value to the extent that it produced some economic utility. Footnote. Consider the vast number of useful, enjoyable, rewarding activity which sits outside of the all-important GDP calculation. Furthermore, economists who had long since replaced philosophers, poets, and artists as the intellectual hinterland of governance turned us all into units of labor. No longer were we seen as individuals capable of a unique contribution to our community and our society, but instead we became numbers on spreadsheets. Marginal utility came to dominate the theory of the labor market, where scarce resources were allocated to firms based on supply and demand. In this overarching framework, we became commodities. Our reason for existence became irrevocably unmoored from religion community, and creativity, and instead became tethered to our utility in an increasingly competitive global workforce. The organizational principle of a modern society became utility. Our schools became factories producing high marginal utility units of labor who would fit neatly into hierarchical companies performing tasks which would boost the profitability of their employer. Creativity and curiosity were stifled by the school bell and the wooden cane. We learnt by rote. We were encouraged not to challenge or to question. Our heads remained down, studiously gaining the knowledge and skills required to become economically viable in the workplace. And we were rewarded for it. Like other well-functioning markets, the market for labor was one based on demand and scarcity. Studious teenagers who forewent the chaos of school bands and high school art, teenagers who knuckled down instead of doodling at the back of the classroom, pupils who were diligently gaining credentials like badges on a scout's arm instead of getting drunk at the house party with the heated pool. Teenagers governed by results-oriented schools and pushy parents gained access to elite universities largely because they towed the line, put in the work, and unquestioningly did what was expected of them. Once on the early career travelator, the goal remained the same: gain ever more credentials and experience to further increase value in the eyes of the labor market. Parents would beam with pride at their Ivy League, Magic Circle, blue chip progeny, talking with barely disguised glee of the children who dossed around and now teach art, or play in a cover band, or are still trying to figure it out. As the workforce moved from factory floor to office cubicle, the hard logic of productivity and optimization prevailed. There was no place for creativity in a world of key performance indicators and objectives and key results. Units of labor were seen as replaceable widgets. First, to cheaper offshore labor, gutting entire communities. Then, as quickly as possible, the goal became to replace as much labor as possible with technologies which would replicate labor at a fraction of the cost and never take a sick day. No matter how hard we tried to suppress our individuality and our desire to do something differently, just this once, we still ended up getting beaten by machines. Machines were unquestioning. They never thought, what next? Or what if? They were not burdened by existential angst and a thrumming depression at the pointlessness of clacking keyboards and pushing paper. Machines are programmed for optimization in advance of a determined goal. Humans, on the other hand, present a complex arrangement of wants, needs, aptitudes, idiosyncrasies, and neuroses. Machines are not inclined towards introspection, nor do they need to blow off steam after a long day's work, waking up the next morning with a sore head. Machines are the ultimate representation of Adam Smith's pin factory specialization. Machines are the aspiration of Frederick Taylor and present a far more relatable object for Jeremy Bentham's grand theories. They are the perfect tools of Max Weber's bureaucracy, existing unthinkingly in an exploitative hierarchy. The more machines have encroached upon what we considered to be the domain of the human, advancing ever more impressively into the intellectual domains that we once believed separated us from other animals, the more we need to protect, nourish, and champion creativity as the unique domain of our shared humanity. Creativity exists as an end in and of itself. We do it even if we weren't being paid. Creativity, that ability to ask what next and what if, is the foundation stone of progress. Without humans and without creativity, we would become ever more optimized at the production of the status quo. Furthermore, creativity is innately human because it connects the creator with its consumer. A creative act forms a dialogue between the creator and its audience. This dialogue is premised on fellowship and can have a profound visceral effect on the consumer. The basis of creativity is empathy and a yearning to understand and be understood as humans by those around us. This series of essays will make the argument, in the strongest possible terms, for the revitalization of creativity as a fundamental cornerstone of flourishing and an integral contributor to society, the economy, and the world.